There are a few big questions that emerged from research on responding to student texts, most of which stem from the notion that a successful writing class is one in which teachers effectively guide students toward competency. Some of these questions are, how can we as teachers be most helpful to student writers? What kind of feedback can we give them that they'll actually pay attention to? If we are obligated to grade, how can we encourage students to find exigencies beyond the grade? And how can we evaluate their writing fairly, consistently, and with the right balance of subjectivity and objectivity? John Bean, Peter Elbow, and Nancy Summers share a few big ideas as to how we might respond productively and evaluate fairly. During the drafting process, we can coach toward revision. We can focus on process and higher order concerns. We can honor the agency of student writers and remind them of their readers. And we can use grading criteria that address both the conventions of a given genre and the particularities of a given text. Taking these measures means avoiding other measures that we might be accustomed to, such as claiming authority of true opinion when commenting on student texts, pointing out what students have done wrong rather than coaching them toward improvement, and commenting as an editor rather than as a reader. I remember my own undergraduate instructors tending toward these types of responses, and I see more clearly now why they weren't particularly helpful. And here are some examples. This excerpt is from a paper I wrote my freshman year of college. In reading it now after having spent a long time developing my writing skills, I understand my teacher's comments, but at the time they not only confused me but left me feeling like he was irritated with me for making mistakes. So here he says that I have awkward phrasing and a dangling modifier, but he doesn't really explain why it's awkward or how I could make it less awkward, and I don't think I even knew what a dangling modifier was. And down here he gets really frustrated at my dropped quotation, but again, I didn't know what a dropped quotation was, and we hadn't been taught how to integrate quotes properly, so I think I kept making that mistake for quite a while. This is from a paper I wrote my senior year of college, my very last quarter. It was the first and only draft of a paper on monstrosity in literature. And I won't blame the quality of this paper on the vague prompt or the fact that I already had enough credits to graduate and so perhaps wasn't trying as hard as I could have, or the fact that I knew this teacher wouldn't penalize me even if I wrote a truly awful paper. And I won't say that the reason I didn't revise it is because he offended me with his editorializing and coffee stains, as you can see here. But I will say that his comments, most of which I agree with, especially in retrospect, didn't help my writing at all. I looked at them, kind of frowned, and filed this paper away until now when I'm using it for this project. So these examples support what Elbow, Bean, and Summers are getting at about how teachers' comments have the potential to confuse, or at their worst, discourage their student writers. Elbow suggests that we keep at the center of our efforts the dictum to at least do no harm. If we judge a student text against an ideal text in our heads, we pay service to our own conception of what good writing looks like, but we do little to bring our knowledge to bear on student learning. If we respond obtusely or too objectively, students are likely to feel defensive, defeated, or simply unmotivated. If we respond negatively or with vague directives, students are likely to respond in kind. For example, when students were told to be more specific and try harder in this particular study, they reacted with the likes of, "You be more specific, you're a stupid jerk, and I feel like kicking the teacher." Lest we get kicked, we should begin our response process by acknowledging our own biases and the notion that to respond to student writing is to interpret a text. We should strive toward commentary that enhances the writer's feeling of dignity, and we should remember our own exigency as teachers, which is ideally to offer assistance to student writers when they are in the process of composing a text. We can put these principles into practice by reading the whole paper before commenting, which allows us to decide what we really need to address versus what's just bothering us, commenting on a separate piece of paper, which shows the student that we respect them as a writer, convey sincere interest in their ideas, evaluate against expectations that we've shared with our students rather than against standards that they may not comprehend or may not have access to, and we can connect classroom activities with the feedback that we give our students. This is an example of when a teacher of mine really invested herself in my ideas. Her end comment focuses almost entirely on ways in which I can advance my argument for future projects. And her comment made a lot of sense to me and was very helpful since we were discussing these issues in class. So once students have turned in their final drafts, it comes time to evaluate. And here it's important to remind ourselves of Elbow's dictum to do no harm, which is not to say give everybody A's, but to caution against evaluating student writing to serve our own notions of what an ideal text looks like. Bean and Elbow each offer elaborate systems of evaluation that honor William Zinser's reminder, the writing teacher's ministry is not just to the words, but to the person who wrote the words. Keeping the person who wrote the words in mind, Bean offers a thorough evaluation system that aims chiefly toward fairness. Operating with a holistic awareness that a paper's value can't be reduced to the sum of its parts, he suggests applying a left brain, right brain method to grading rubrics. Bean's method is contingent upon the standard that we grade or rank papers on a regular basis. And this standard is so standard that suggestions to move away from it strike some of us, even some of us in 537, as shocking and provocative. Elbow uses the term ranking to describe the act of summing up one's judgment of a performance or person into a single holistic number or score. If we sympathize with Elbow's skepticism of ranking, how can we rank less and evaluate more? He suggests a number of strategies that focus more on process, reflective writing, and writing beyond the grade, such as portfolios, incorporating readerly comments, and encouraging students to share their texts with multiple audiences. And I should point out here that I went to the Evergreen State College where Elbow used to teach, and where faculty members do not administer grades for papers or at the end of each quarter, but write narrative evaluations of their students. I think that by combining response strategies that respect the learning processes of student writers and using a system of evaluation that incorporates various modes of response and voices of multiple readers, it helps encourage student writers to develop their own voices, which in turn motivates them to learn how to transfer their writing skills across disciplines and genres, asks them to view themselves as writers as well as students, and treats writing as a process of learning and discovery, rather than as a one-shot test of their ability to meet our expectations. And our expectations can be sometimes elusive, sometimes arbitrary. So I think it's good to kind of meet them on this common ground where we're sharing knowledge and expectations and starting the conversation there.